Hello, this is a Brave Knight Mercenary Spotlight on Floria. Floria is a 5-star rarity support. She is a druid born between a fairy and a human. She grew up in the forest and travels the world to protect nature. Floria's companion is Diana, and she is a spirit that was saved by Floria. Her story is that she travels the world and protects nature. I'll briefly go over Floria's skills and gameplay style and provide some of my opinions on her. I won't be going over the details of her skills, but just the general parts of it. I linked the Brave Knight Encyclopedia in the video description where you can easily read on her stats and skill values. Floria's first skill is Force of Nature Stovall. This is Floria's main healing skill and it carries many components. The primary part of this skill is that for a set amount of turns, any unit that she buffs will heal a portion of Floria's max life every turn. The second part of this skill is that whenever Force of Nature expires or is removed, allies will heal more life based on Floria's max HP. At +6 and above, the skill gains a third part. Units with Force of Nature receives debuff immunity for the turn that they are attacked. Debuff immunity occurs after normal attack, so any debuffs that is applied before normal attack is still applied. At +12 and above, Force of Nature starts to change in various ways. The heals are stronger, and the debuff immunity can extend as far as 3 turns after the unit is normal attacked. Most notably, however, is that Force of Nature comes with lasting enhancement. This is a renewal type subskill that will reset the duration of applied buffs after the unit has been attacked. Force of Nature itself is eligible to have its duration extended, so whenever a unit with Force of Nature is hit, the duration of Force of Nature is reset now thanks to a lasting enhancement. This also applies to other non-Floria buffs that are on the unit, but some buffs cannot be refreshed. Those that can, however, will benefit from lasting enhancement. So a quick TLDR on what the skill is doing at +12 and above since it's doing a lot. Allies heal HP every turn, allies heal more HP when the buff is reapplied, allies gain debuff immunity after being hit by a normal attack, and allies have their buff timers refreshed after being hit by a normal attack. Force of Nature is also refreshed as a result. Floria's second skill is HP Boost with Stovall. This is a permanent stat enhancement that boosts allies' max HP based on Floria's max HP stat. This effect is stackable, and since it's a permanent skill, it cannot be removed. Do note that if Floria is in her own buff radius, she can also boost her own max HP. This means that the next time that she buffs her allies, they receive even more max HP since Floria's own max HP is higher. Another important thing to keep in mind is that this HP boost only affects non-magician units. Mages cannot have their HP boosted by Floria. Floria's third skill is Regeneration Barrier. Floria gains incoming damage reduction and heals part of her max HP every turn. This barrier cannot be removed and is active at start of battle. It goes away after a long duration. Floria's awakening skill is Permanent Debuff Immunity. Floria is immune to all debuffs. At +11, the skill also comes with incoming damage reduction. Floria is Brave Knight's premier 5-star healer. She has a lot of synergy within her own kit based around max health and healing values. Floria is very unique among other supports in that she does not directly tamper with any unit's offensive stats. Instead, she is one of the very few characters that can increase an ally's max HP stat. As such, she has various interesting utility in that she can increase the life of warriors to make them less likely to die to various threats or just make defenders far more tanky overall. Her lasting enhancement on her buff is also rare among supports in that even in the circumstance that Floria or your other supports end up dying, their buffs can still be retained on their allies. So long as the buffed units are being hit, the buff duration refreshes. For Floria, this means that her heal is retained on her allies, which allow them to continue healing back the damage that they receive after taking a hit. Floria's primary weakness is nullifiers and prohibitions. Her mainstay heal buff is easily removed by nullifier skills, and is easily blocked off by buff or heal prohibition. Her buff tiles is decent at 3x3 range, but because of the nature of her buff, Floria forms tend to clump up easily and are very prone to AoE attacks. When it comes to runes, you ideally want one solid flat rune on Floria and one HP percentage rune on her. The reason for this split is that Floria's base HP is low enough to where one flat HP rune is still beneficial. This all depends on what runes you have, of course, but the more max HP that Floria has, the more effective that she is overall. Here is a comparison between double flat, double percentage, and one flat and 1% HP rune of the same tier. You can see that double flat is the lowest, double percentage is second, and one flat and 1% provides the most HP. Thanks to AstralSky for providing these rune values and screenshots. I'll go over what Floria counters. Floria doesn't really directly counter many units, but her buff can make it very difficult for some units to effectively perform their function. Floria's debuff immunity that occurs after normal attack is great for Catherine, who relies on DOT to take out many tanks. The debuff immunity will block any debuffs so long as they take place after normal attack. Taylor's Freeze, Gunther's Dragon Flame, and Kaylin's Combat Stigma will be blocked. Even units like Christina, who applies DOT before her normal attack, may have issues with Floria. Christina will only get to apply one stack of her DOT before the rest of Christina's 4 hits are hitting a debuff immune target. One stack of Christina's DOT is fairly weak and will not outpace Floria's turn-by-turn healing. Floria's ability to increase her allies' max HP is also invaluable for having the team survive things that they may not have otherwise. 2 stacks of Floria's buff can push many characters to the range where they can actually start surviving an attack on Seto, or receiving an attack from them. If Floria manages to ramp up herself or the team, Seto is made irrelevant as he can no longer do damage to kill anything. Any unit that does not do HP scaling damage is vulnerable to being invalidated by Floria's max HP boost. Dalvi, Elenir, Susera, Larkus, Eden, Taylor, and Christina might end up in situations where they can no longer kill anything due to the combination of their targets having too much life and healing. Because Floria is debuff immune and has decent bulk on her own, she can tank Bane, Kaylin, and Celia. I'll go over some Floria counters now. Nullifiers are one of the best ways to deal with Floria's heal. Yuri, Valze, and Kyria are some examples. Buff or heal prohibition is also very valuable in blocking Floria's heal from being placed on her allies. Helga, Angelica, Orvina, and Barbara can inflict this. You can also utilize the likes of Showman and Helga. Helga's buff prohibition is tough to time, but it's effective if it blocks off Floria's buff. Showman's buff prohibition lasts for a whopping 50 turns, so anyone caught in that won't be having their HP raised for practically the rest of the fight. Units that deal scaling max HP additional damage are also generally effective after Floria raises her allies' max HP. Frisia, Ventana, Levia, Angelica, and Barbara are some few examples. From a strategic standpoint overall, Floria herself isn't usually the threat, but rather the people who she is buffing can end up being. A really beefed up Grand Hilder can single-handedly end the game, so if you don't run proper counters like Levia or Ventana, then you could be in a lot of trouble. Floria's buff isn't that impactful within the first 2 rounds, but if you let her ramp up, then you're going to end up in a very long fight that inevitably leads to your loss. Make sure to pack some powerful hitting units with good AoE. Alec, Valze, Belfern, and Nartis are some good ones. So some synergies with Floria. Floria is a very interesting unit in terms of synergy. One of the most notorious combos that was often used is Floria, Albion, and Grand Hilder. This combo was notorious because Grand Hilder is immune to nullifiers and prohibitions, so she can actually maintain the defensive buffs provided by the likes of Albion and Floria. Floria's buff reset in her first skill ensures that Grand can still hold on to Albion's buff even if Albion dies along the way, and Floria's max HP boost makes Grand Hilder near impossible to kill by anything that isn't Ventana or Levia. Other units that benefit from Floria's buff are Jin and Ludmilla. Jin is pretty hard to kill by himself, and Floria could push him even further. Ludmilla is an interesting character that scales off of her max HP, so she actually gets stronger with each Floria HP boost. Some tanks also benefit a lot from Floria, especially ones that cannot heal on their own. Kaylin and Glacia are the major ones, but almost all tanks appreciate having Floria's buff, other than Arcan, who can't receive buffs. Remember that mages also cannot receive the HP boost, so there's less synergy involved there. They can still, however, receive the healing. Okay, so from my opinion, Floria is a wildly different kind of support compared to the others in this game. Notice how I used the word wild because she's a forest girl and whatnot? Yeah, that was awful. Brave Knight's meta has historically been focused on who could one-shot who, and supports were mostly designed to push your units to the limits of their offensive capabilities, while providing an immunity or 2 of some sort. So with that said, Floria throws all of that out of the way and focuses purely on defensive aspects. The goal of Floria is to make her allies tanky to the point where nothing can kill them anymore, and win once the rounds start hitting overtime. Even percentage HP attacks that may counter her initially will eventually fall short. Remember that max HP scaling attacks cap at 50,000 HP, and Floria could definitely begin to push the limits of units who get near extending that, such as Grand Hilder. Floria's viability is very dependent on what the current climate of the meta is. If the meta favors very powerful and fast-hitting units with large AoEs, then Floria will struggle. As of this recording, Floria has a very difficult time dealing with units like Valze, Mamonir, and Belfern. Another issue that Floria compositions tend to have is that they're very support and defender heavy. She depends on Grandhilda because Grandhilda is the only character that can properly retain buffs. With Grandhilda potentially dying to many things, she may need to rely on Albion and Galania for additional utility. That's 3 supports and 1 defender. You begin to lose room for a lot of other things when running a Floria based composition. If you can make it work, however, you can effectively freeze a battle and they can't kill you anymore. It's very satisfying to watch. Floria also carries a lot of utility beyond PvP. She is one of the most valuable transport world boss units because she can raise the max HP of up to 9 units. That's a lot of points gained, and she's one of the best units in the game to reach optimal points in those world bosses. She's also very useful in other PvE content as well. So should you build Floria? My answer defaults to no if you intend to go the PvP route. Floria is incredibly sensitive to the pace of the meta, and units have gradually been hitting harder and harder with larger AoE coverage. Floria may be good in the future if there is a unit that she can enable, but that unit has to be a fairly radical game changer. Otherwise, she's largely a gimmick in PvP and could potentially stop people who are not prepared to deal with her, but once you face against the likes of Levia, Ventana, and others, her gimmick is easily stopped. For PvE, however, she is a great unit to have, and she does not need heavy investment. Plus 3 is the most efficient skill level for her to be at, because it's the best that her HP boost is going to be for a while. Her next HP boost skill up is at plus 10. Floria is not a priority investment, so it's generally fine to keep her at a low skill rank until you feel the need to really push her higher. Overall, I'm glad that Floria goes a different direction than most supports in this game. She's very unique, and I like that very much. Defensive playstyles are kind of annoying since they tend to promote longer matches. Sometimes I just want to do my dailies and get on with my life. But fortunately for Brave 9, I don't have a life. Thanks for watching my Floria Mercenary Spotlight. Please like, subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll definitely try to push out more in the future. Thanks.